Good morning. Welcome again to our online service. We're going to have a reflection today from Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, starting at verse 21. Now, it's a long reading, so stay with me. It's a few stories that are well known to us. It starts like this. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him. He was in the lake. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet. And he begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. And a large crowd followed him, and they pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and yet she was no better, but rather she grew worse. And she had heard about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and in trembling, and she fell down before him, and she told the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside, and took the child's father and mother, and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand, and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the little girl got up and began to walk about, and she was 12 years of age. At this they were overcome with amazement. But he strictly ordered them that no one should know about this. And he told them to give her something to eat. This is the word of the Lord. So in that reading today, and it's a long one, there are lots of different characters that we could talk about. There's the woman who was bleeding, and the information is not simply shared by Mark out of medical interest. It's an important part of the story, because according to Levitical law, such a condition would have rendered her as impure. It would have literally cut her off from the religious community. She wouldn't have been allowed in the temple. And likely, it also cut her off from financial stability. And certainly any money that she has already been spent. By touching Jesus, even the hem of his garment, according to the old law, that would have rendered him unclean also. And actually, when you think about the crowd, just simply her jostling to get to him would have rendered those people who she touched unclean by nature of touching them. And I know that's very hard for us to understand today, but it was part of the Levitical law. So she was the woman who was scorned and a woman who was marginalized. Then there's Jairus' daughter, and he is in that terrible dance that no parent ever wants to find themselves in. And whether it's because of war or famine or violence or illnesses, there are few things more heartbreaking than the desperate plea of a parent. But the character that I want to focus on with you today is actually the crowd. Because the crowd here they're the scorning skeptics. Now, skeptics come in different shapes and sizes. There are the disciples and the sort of mocking, snarky tone that they take in regards to Jesus' inquiry about who touched him. But then there are the mourners, the professional mourners who one moment are wailing and the next minute are laughing when Jesus says the child is only asleep. Skepticism is very much the parasite of possibility. But it lives in most crowds. And there's an element of it that lives in all of us. I was thinking today about a passage from the Old Testament. Now, it's not one of our readings today, but it's been with me this week. And it's from Numbers chapter 13. And in the story, Moses identifies 12 leaders within the community, the people of Israel. And he sends the 12 leaders to go and spy on the land of Canaan, which is the promised land where God has been taking them. So these 12 people are to go off and scout the land. Anyway, 2 of them come back, Caleb and Joshua. They come back, and when Moses says to them, "What did you find?" they said to him, "Moses, it's a land that's flowing with milk and honey." Now, obviously not literally flowing with milk and honey. It would be terribly unhygienic. But what they mean is it's a land filled with possibility and potential. And then the other 10 come. And Moses asked them, "What did you see?" And they said, "Oh, it's a land full of giants and fortress walls." And what happens is, as they share this, the people hear it. And they begin to weep and grumble. And they begin to dissent. The perspective of the 10 has an impact on them. They query what they're doing and why they're doing it. And is this really the promised land? And as a result, in Scripture, God declares that they are not yet ready to enter Canaan. And they wander 40 more years in the wilderness. So listen, what's going on with this story? Well, here's the thing. The 2 and the 10, they see the same thing. They see the same Canaan. It's not as if 10 go over there and they see giants and 2 go over here and they see milk and honey. No. They all see the same thing. But 2 of them see possibilities, and 10 of them see problems. And look, it's important not to be naive about the problems of the day. We look at the world that we live in, the things the challenges that live within the church today, and they are many. Not just how we address what COVID has done to us, but the changes in our society. We know what the problems are. We know that there be giants. But actually, there is a calling in us to be Caleb and Joshua, to see possibility and potential. I trust and I hope that's where we are as a church. The world is changing around us. We are changing. But there is tremendous possibility and potential if we choose to see it. Let's go back to our gospel lesson today. Because what the skeptical crowd see, the skeptical crowd see a marginalized, ill woman and a child who has died. But what Jesus chooses to see is an opportunity for healing and wholeness and inclusion, and the possibility of new life and resurrection. Let's walk into potential and possibilities, shall we? Amen.